stop, following what everyone else has been doing. Don't be afraid. Okay. Fear is a very strong thing. At a certain point in your life, right? Money's just not a big enough factor for you to go down a road that you don't really like.
We are back with the What You're About podcast with me, Chad Abood, and we've got a legend today. I've been listening to him. We've been reading about him. He's been at the Future of Law before anyone was talking about the Future of Law. Mitch Kowalski, I'm just so excited to get into this. And I also love it because, of course, you're going to be speaking at the Future of Law conference that I'm going to be co-hosting with Pauline Chan for Good Lawyer, November 21. I've seen Mitch speak many times. You're not going to want to miss him. And I think, you don't just talk about it. You are about it. For 25 plus years, you have been navigating all of the different areas of law. Big law, at the city, governments around the world, some advising some of the biggest companies around the world. You've seen it in all the different jurisdictions. And so when we were thinking about folks that we were just really, really wanting to have at the summit and on the podcast to give us both the domestic and the international lens on what the future of law is, wanted to make sure that we had this conversation also because one of my favorite things about you is that you don't pull punches. You tell it how you believe that it is. And really it's the nudge that we all need because some of us, we kind of hide behind what it can be because we're a little bit scared to step out and say it. And what I've always really appreciated about you is you've never been scared to do it. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Thanks, Chad. Happy to be here. A little bit over the top in terms of introduction to me. I appreciate it,
Never.
man. Thank you.
Never.
Thank you.
Never,
Thank
my
you.
friend. Never. So let's get into this because, I started in a national law firm. You're in a national law firm. Your career ended up moving in all kinds of interesting directions, but it started the way that many lawyers start their career by going into one of the big firms. They hire a lot of talent. You were there. You were doing commercial. You're doing real estate. Like, what was going on? Did the Mitch of back then expect that it was going to be something as atypical as being a professor at a law school and, working at a major airport authority now? Like, did you see it or were you like, this Bay Street path made a lot of sense to you at the time?
No, I mean, I'm like probably every other law student that comes out even today. That's like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to work really hard. I'm going to be a partner. Life's going to be great, and I'm just going to be a big megastar partner doing crazy stuff for the rest of my life. And that was so so not what happened. But also, but it was my choice, right? So I mean, it was a difficult decision to say, man, this is just so not for me.
Take us through that. What was it that wasn't for
you? Besides everything. It was what I found in my experience with both the international firms I was with was that it was just like winning a pie eating contest where the prize is you get to eat more pie. And it's all about eating more pie and eating more pie and eating more pie, as opposed to really super interesting work and billing appropriately for that level of work and stuff. It was just a treadmill. And I really didn't like that.
It wasn't.
I didn't like the way I was being told to work. Yeah. I didn't like the way I was being told to bill. I didn't like the way I was being told to practice. I was just like, this just doesn't sit right with me, right? It's just that thing that's in your gut. They're going, oh man, like it just doesn't make sense to me. So
what started happening? Like, what were you thinking? Okay, it could be this option. Was it the typical one that many of us, including myself, have taken, which is, okay, then I'll go in-house and see if that feels a little bit different? Like, was that the track, or were you already thinking
the track was, the first track is, it must be this firm. So I'll go to a different firm. And then you're going, oh, it's not just that firm. That's the way everybody operates. And it was like, okay, not terribly happy. how do I find my happiness, right? And I think that's the thing that a lot of students and young lawyers are. It's like, well, you know, we forget about making ourselves happy because it's like, well, I should be happy because I am successful
Right.
by, society's definition, because I've made it at this firm and I'm doing this kind of work, and et cetera, and my paycheck is a pretty good paycheck, so I should be happy. So I should not listen to those voices in my head that are saying, are you really happy? So I listened to those after the second firm and was like, okay, yeah, no, this, like, I'm very unhappy. I'm going to burn out. And so the opportunity to go in-house, I was like, okay, so in-house, it's got to be in-house is going to be for me, because I really enjoyed law, right? I'm not saying I enjoyed every single thing I was doing, but like generally speaking, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of like the challenge and the intellectual elements of it. I just didn't like the delivery part of it. And okay, so I'll go in-house, and in-house, at that particular, which was the city, and it was okay. I felt underutilized, quite frankly, and so that pushed me away from that. It's like, wow, like I didn't like the structure of the department. I didn't think that utilization of myself and other lawyers and the clerks and stuff was the mix was not right for me. And there, I didn't really have an opportunity for people to really listen to me in terms of how can we change this mix to make this better for everyone,
And
including
that's got
for,
to be a big driver. I would think for someone like
yeah,
you, having some of that autonomy and agency to like design something, I got to think in
yeah,
you was like a burning pressure to be like, hey, if I can't impact this in a way that makes sense to Mitch, then I got to
exactly.
find a new home. And it's not,
I gotta
they
find,
couldn't have paid you another $10,000 to like fill that gap. And so then
no,
what happened here? Like you tried the two big traditional routes for years. It wasn't for you. And then you were like, I'm just going to bet on myself then.
yeah, exactly. That's pretty much it. Like you get to that point where you just say, okay, I'm going to go off, do my own thing, and then really try to think about what the heck's making me so unhappy, right? And that was really when, I started doing the writing, and, the books came out, and the consulting and that kind of stuff, because it forced me to be really introspective and, build on what, Richard Susskind was writing in the UK, who at the time, right, the interesting thing is when Susskind came out, like I picked up on him right away, right? Because it was like, oh, this is it. This is what I'm feeling. This is what's going on. And how do I take what he's done and put a different spin on it, how it relates to me and to Canada and all these sorts of things. So people forget that when he first came out, nobody knew who he was over here. In UK, he was a thing. And so I just use that as as validation to say, wow, I'm not insane, right? I'm not some kook with these kooky ideas. There's actually, a tribe out there that I can, be part of and build off of. And so that really helped me, sustain me through those early years where people are just kind of looking at you kind of.
A lot of people would have just read the book though and said like, okay, now I'm going to, try to, but then you decided, well, then I guess I'll write my own version too. Were you always a writer as a kid? Like how did you decide, oh, I better write something to like be reflective?
Well, that's another thing. Yeah, no. I always liked writing when I was in high school and university. Right. I did a lot of writing, school newspaper, all that kind of stuff. And then you go to law school and everything falls by the wayside. Right?
Yeah.
Like your life changes, like it's all about law. And then you get into practice and it's all about law, and all those other peripheral things that you enjoyed doing and skill sets that you had just get chucked by the wayside. And so they started to come back and kind of go, well, I really like that. Like I want to get my ideas out there. And the best way to do that is to put them down on paper and really filter them out. So yeah, that's where it was. And then, I'd practice on the side as well. which is fun because I had clients that I really enjoyed who were saying like, dude, like, come on, like, we don't like those law firms that you dumped us on. Like, we want to come back to you because we like your style. We like the way you do things.
So what was the
And
biggest thing? Like, okay, you control this firm, so you control the billing model. We
yep.
get that. But like, what was the most important thing for you that you could offer your clients through your own practice than when you were in a firm? Like, what was the part that was most meaningful to you?
Billing and style, right? So when you're on your own, you give the advice that you feel is appropriate, as opposed to in a firm where you're saying, "Oh my God, you can't say that." You have to be very by the book, right? And that often means giving opinions and giving advice that is very generic and very stale, and a lot of times not terribly useful to the client, because you said, well, it could be this, or you could be this, or you could be this, right? You don't have the freedom to say, look, sure, there's this, but really, this is the way you should go. And when you have that kind of a relation, and right, these were clients that I dealt with a long time, so we could have that really good conversation with them and say, look, you could do that. I think it's a wrong decision. Just saying. And the clients really appreciate that.
That impact must have been so important for you.
Pardon?
That impact must have been so important for you. Like, it's so obvious now because we've seen you for years speak on these types of topics and the passion and the purpose. But I feel like you were probably like this or close to like this for most of your career, that like the impact of being able to have agency over your style is probably so fulfilling and so meaningful for like why you even do this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I find that even today, right? In the work that I do, is like having the ability to do that is critical to me. And I think it's critical to a lot of people. It's just people push it down, right? And they push it down because they think, oh, well, if I'm a lawyer, I can't really do that. I have to put that aside, right? Yeah. And so, to the extent, we talk a lot in the profession about diversity and all this stuff, and it's like, it's some of it, a lot of it actually is performative. A lot of it is just, a thin layer. It's right. Not real in terms of bringing your whole self to the firm and all this kind of stuff. That's great, but there's a deeper level, which is freedom and autonomy to do things in a certain way that they can't do in a firm.
Yeah.
So here's the thing is, and I tell my students this too, because nobody thinks about going off on your own and doing things as much, right? It's not cool. It's not the definition of success, but it is so much easier to go out on your own these days because of the tools that are available to you as a solo practitioner.
Yeah.
You really don't need the huge apparatus of a firm in a lot of areas of law. And so, and students don't know that, and young lawyers haven't really quite figured that out if they go into, even when you're in a large firm. Like I said, when I was general counsel at a real estate company, I would say to my external counsel, I said, like, just in case you're thinking of leaving, ABC firm, I'll still give you work because I like your style, like the way you do things. And, dude, like, we're talking on the phone or by Zoom or email and stuff like that. Like, what more do you need? You have Word on your computer, boom, done.
Yeah, so, between like the legal tech and AI and community building opportunities that there are now, even just over the last 5 years, it's kind of remarkable in terms of how much like decentralized ecosystem and power there is for individuals who have a desire to like use their skills in a way that they don't feel like they can. But I'm curious. I mean, obviously, you're a very passionate guy, and you obviously are very comfortable in your own skin. But at the time when you were making these big choices to leave international law firms or a very large internal legal team, what were the folks closest to you saying? Were they saying like 1,000% Mitch, makes sense, can't believe you didn't do this already? Or they were like, whoa, you're going to start your own thing? Like, you're not going to eat. What were folks saying to you at the time?
Yeah, that's exactly what they were saying. They're saying like, I mean, there are people who would, pat you on, oh yeah, okay, yeah, good for you. But you could tell they're saying it because they thought they should be saying it as opposed
Right.
to what they really meant. Right. And yeah, people just thought, wow, he's lost his mind. He's, he just couldn't cut it. So,
Mm.
whatever, I hope he's okay, kind of thing. And I think even today, there are a lot of people who would say that, if somebody did that same career path now, the initial reaction, especially if you surround yourself with big law and stuff like that, they'll just be like, oh my God,
Yeah, I mean, it
what are you
happened to
doing?
me.
What are
When
you
I
doing?
left a national law firm, I got that
Yeah.
look and those questions. And, I basically felt like, well, if and I realized it wasn't my dream. And so, which is other people's dream. So it's great for them. But I thought for me, it's not my
Yeah.
dream. And so my answer was, well, if I'm not building my own dream, all I'm doing is building yours. And so it's just very important to me to
Yeah.
build my own dream. And so it was a big enough shift to push me. And it was the same thing even when I left being a GC of a tech portfolio. I think folks were a little bit like, are you sure you're going to start your own advisory and coaching business? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, man. And what I felt is very similar to you, but like the agency and discovery of crafting something that's very meaningful for you and using the impact that you feel like you can uniquely make. Like for me, that's just worth so much. And clearly you've made an entire career out of it. And the work that you've done has spanned the entire globe. And so when you think about like how it grew from the law firm to the consulting, what are some of the things that you saw happening in other areas of the world where you thought, well, we need to get on that pretty quickly because we're not there?
Well, the world in law is pretty crazy. I mean, what you find is that within each country, everybody's at different levels. And so, the one thing that and I sound like a broken record on this, but, without, help on the regulatory aspect of how law is governed, right? How legal
Mm.
services are delivered. That is something, certainly saw it play out in England, well, see it play out in
Yeah.
Australia, starting to play out in some U.S. states now.
Yeah.
That is something that, I've been on that forever, and gone through all the hearings and submissions in Ontario, when the Ontario Law Society tried to do that and then got shut down.
Yeah.
But that is something really we need to get on. The technology floats all around the world, and it really, there's stuff out there that's really good and really interesting. And if you don't want to use it, that's certainly your choice. I just think it is unfortunate the number of people who do not look beyond the province or state that they're practicing in and are unwilling to look across what's happening in jurisdictions for any kind of processes or
Right.
technology. I mean,
So
so
I would love to
go
ask you
ahead.
about the governance piece because, folks that are listening to this are from like all different areas of the legal industry and beyond. And so, while you've been a big proponent of it, lots of people don't really understand this moat, this historic moat that the legal industry has had. And they might not also understand other countries they've built the drawbridge over the moat. And so maybe like if you can give us first of all, like what it means to have the moat and then also your thoughts on the drawbridge and why, you're an advocate.
Sure. Okay, so let's put it this way. Let's start from the understanding that at some point in time, society decided that lawyers were magical special people and only they could provide legal services, but also they're the only ones who can control that legal services and benefit from those legal services financially. So and that made sense maybe 200 years ago, right? Totally get that. We have lawyers are probably the most educated people in society. They've got to help people with laws. Sure, I get that. We live in a very different time now. And if we continue to give lawyers a pure monopoly on legal services, in how they're delivered, in ownership of those legal services, then what you have is a very small group of people with a very siloed way of looking at the world, a very siloed experience level. That means that your legal services don't really change very much. And
so is that the
if
biggest
you,
negative that you see? Is it that like the legal services just don't iterate because they don't have to?
100%. Why would you? You're a monopoly. So if I know that I'm the only guy who can run this kind of business, then my competition is just some other guy or woman who is just like me. And so as long as I just keep pace with them and neither of us really changes a lot, then there's no competition. If you then say, but if you said, oh, well, Safeway wants to run a whole bunch of law firms in their, locations across, the provinces they operate in, and they will run and control and they will hire lawyers to do certain things. They provide greater access at cheaper costs. They can be, have more efficiencies across, technologies and stuff because they are having a platform across many locations instead of just one location, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think you have a very different outcome.
Right. And you get a
And
diversity of thinking from the people who are running it because they're coming from all aspects and education, trainings and delivery of services. And so they're thinking about the consumer experience and in more lenses, which I've got to think be helpful. But it seems like you look at England, you look at Australia, you look at Arizona, it's happening. It seems like such a logical discussion to have, such a logical outcome. You've been a part of it in Ontario and you've tracked it across the world. What is happening such that if jurisdictions like that can do it, and we haven't seen the world fall to pieces in those places, what is happening in places like Ontario and other, places like that?
Well, nothing. Well, the Ontario approach was we need more data, we need more time, right? And which is quite funny because Australia's been doing this for, it's coming up to almost 25 years now. So I don't know how much more data you need from a jurisdiction that is virtually identical to ours. England and Wales is coming up to, almost 15 years. Again, I don't know how much more you need. Pretty sophisticated group of lawyers in England and Wales. It's, where we got all our stuff from. So it is just simply protectionism and saying, gosh, we can continue to make excuses until someone really forces us to do it. And so whether or not the competition, bureau in Canada, they've gone after the real estate agents now, right? They've just had the real estate, or they're investigating the real estate agents now. If they would turn their eyes to lawyers, maybe something would happen. But like lawyers don't move unless they actually have to. So,
okay. And then when you look at England and Australia, have you seen much better outcomes? Like, has the data proven that out?
The data has, okay, so the data is not great in terms of saying that the world is all rosy. The data has shown that there is greater access and greater innovation in firms that have allowed outsiders into law and provided a greater diversity of career choice within those firms. Like when you think about it, right? And we just talked about this in my class the other day, is if you're not a lawyer, why the heck would you work at a law firm? Like, what would be the incentive to work at a law firm? You're never going to get a piece of the action, right? So you're going to be an employee, and you're never going to get a leadership role because you're not a lawyer. So why the heck would you ever work? So how would you attract really good people who are not lawyers, whether it's marketing or technology or business development? How do you attract those people when the incentives are not there?
Yeah, and they get treated that way too. Like you see it,
and they get treated that
when those folks are in there. Like even smart, smart, talented folks, they get treated, this way when they're in the firms because they are not really permitted to have the level of authority that would indicate that they should have more of a say, and so they don't get treated that way even when the talent is there, which is it's really unfortunate. So I'm glad that we built that out a little bit, because I do think it is one of the most exciting pieces, and it feels a little bit governance-y to people, but it actually is one of the biggest differences in terms of career paths, quality of service, innovation of service, and the consumer experience, which is what the whole thing really is about anyway. And the fact that we have jurisdictions so similar to us, very sophisticated jurisdictions, where it's not like there's consumer complaints left, right, and center because we changed the model and now Safeway of, England is blowing things up. No, we're not seeing that. And so, you're such an advocate of it, which we need more of. And I appreciate you for holding the light for us, Mitch. And so, when you think about, we've always got this governance model, we've got a technology play, like, where is your mind going on what you'd want lawyers and the legal industry to be thinking of beyond that for what the future of law is bringing? Like, what is closest to your heart and mind right now?
So it's just openness. You guys got to start looking across industries and taking every single piece of interesting innovation, no matter what it may be, into your practice. Stop, following what everyone else has been doing. You have to think about, from a client perspective, what does the client want? How do I address the client needs? How do I provide those legal services in a way that fits into the client's life as opposed to the client fitting into my life? And that's just my mantra time and time again. And that just covers everything. If you start thinking that way, client first, then you start to come to different conclusions on how things should be done.
How do you do it?
Do I need an office? How do I meet my clients? How do I deliver those services? What's my intake like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. I mean,
what's like a way that you do it in your life? Like, obviously you're at a big organization right now, and so you're not thinking about like you're not building your own firm in terms of intake, but you're still doing intake of your stakeholders. And so, like, what is something that happened this week for you where you're like, I just wish more lawyers were watching Mitch on 24/7 cam to say, like, this is how I do it? Because I think for a lot of us, we hear about things like client service delivery and technology, but we don't really know what it means. And so what does it mean to you in an average day?
Yeah. So we're just building out a new intake system right now because we didn't really have one. And what you find, and you know this yourself, Chad, is like a lot, whether it's big or small companies, their internal teams are just always going. So they're just going file to file to file. So CAM system, it's not really that great. Contract management system, not really that great. Just simple intakes, not that great. Process, just basic processes so that when you and I win Lotto Max tonight, the next person who comes in knows how to do it. Just onboarding stuff. How do people get onboarded into your department? Do you just say, hey, welcome, this is great. There's coffee machines over there, washrooms down there. There's your desk. Here's a bunch of work. Please start doing work, right? Without, a real structured kind of process. So my biggest thing is just structure. I'm so focused on structure and structuring how I operate so that someone else can take over this stuff without really thinking about it, and ensuring that my team knows, how we do things and where things are, and we're not so reliant on go ask this person, they should know, go ask that person, they should know. It should just be here. So I'm hyper focused on structure.
I love that for many reasons. And some folks think like, oh, it's like a more efficient way to practice. If the efficiency bug doesn't get you, here's other reasons why. For me, I implemented a CLM for automated contracting. So I was a big fan of this, is that it makes your life less annoying because you're out of so much drudgery. So you enjoy your practice more, you enjoy being a lawyer more. It gives you more time to create the social bonds with people, because lawyers, what happens a lot is all of our cognitive capacity gets sucked into like typing and Word documents. And so then we lose the skills of and lose the feeling to create human connection within our own team, within other business stakeholders. And what it turns out is that connection is the thing that allows other people to want to listen to you and want to ask for your advice. And so it doesn't matter how much you know. If no one's interested in talking to you, it doesn't matter. And so, implement the technology and the structure just to get the drudgery out of your life so you can take your brain up a level. It's not, I think what we have a lot is a fear of like, ooh, I'm not going to be relevant anymore. Right? Like if I'm going to automate some stuff, I'm not going to be relevant. And I just think that you become extremely more relevant because your brain is doing much more high functioning work.
Exactly. I mean, that's why we all went to law school, to do the high functioning work, right? And that's why the people want to listen to you in your department or your clients or whatever. They want the high functioning part. The sort of nuts and bolts stuff is a given, and they don't really, they're not as focused on that. So saying you're a really good nuts and bolts person, is meaningless. And like you said, the connection is so huge, especially in-house, right? Like, that it's just that if the teams like you, then they trust you, right? And then you can provide better service. And then you get to understand the risk tolerances around what they're thinking. You get to understand other issues that they're working on, that you can help them come to a better decision. So you can't just be the hyper focused, I'm detail oriented, kind of person. It's not.
It's very difficult to keep up with businesses because they have so much technology with CRM tools and, whatever other customer support tools they're using. You can't keep up with the volume. That's what I found. Like a scaling tech portfolio, I can't keep up with thousands and thousands of deals. I had to automate 90% of it, which was extremely low value and is better for the business to have a decentralized access point where the parameters are basically all set other than some commercial terms that they can toggle on and off. And what happens is, like, even business teams sometimes have a little bit of a fear point where they're like, oh, so I'm not going to get high touch legal support. And what I told them is, actually, you're going to get more high touch legal support because 85% of it that sits right down the center of the fairway, fully automated, decentralized to you with the risk profile that we want. And the 15% that you actually need the support with, well, now I'm going to have the emotional and cognitive energy to actually help you without losing my mind because I've crushed through 15 SaaS agreements today. And so they win and you win, but you have to create the cognitive energy. Otherwise, the law will suck it out of you just in the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you make a really good point about, allowing the business to do a lot of this stuff. Well, not a lot of this stuff, but to do a certain level of work. Because then, but what I find is they really start to understand the transactions a lot more too, and they're able to issue spot a bunch of stuff as well. And then that helps them in the negotiation because they know, this stuff, I'm telling you guys right now, it's going to be a problem. Legal's going to go crazy. Then they're going to have to send it to risk, and risk is going to say, oh my God, no, we can't do this and this. So it is, as you said, it's a win-win-win. The more, if you can structure things correctly and allow the business to have their autonomy, bring me in when needed, and then we go for drinks afterwards.
That's the frame up too, is that like, I want to give you, what I said to a sales team is like, why do you want legal to be populating template agreements? Don't you want to close deals 24/7 around the world? Because that's how you make 100%. Your money and that's how you close quota. Yeah. And so when you frame it up from someone else's perspective, whether it's personal or professional, it's the same idea. Is like, speak to someone else's motivators and stressors, or like an account management team who has thousands of accounts, who has to do like slices of customer segment data on a whim whenever they're called on the carpet. If the data is accurate and true, because you used a legal technology product that forced them to use their CRM or whatever it is, they're going to love you for that. And you made their life better. Meanwhile, you made your own life better. And so for lawyers out there listening to Mitch and thinking, whoa, I got to build infrastructure, I would say yes. And think about how you're going to frame it up to the business so that they're champions for you. They support you with not only advocacy, but resources. Maybe it's like helping to pay for stuff, because this is where legal teams get bogged down. They say, I don't got budget. Money. I can't get any help. Have you run into that with like, oh, now we don't have budget. We don't have time. We don't have capacity.
Yeah. Budget is a real thing when you're in-house. It's always a struggle. So, to the extent that you can leverage someone else's budget and convince them that it's a really good thing for all of us, that is really the secret sauce. Because most of the time, I mean, like, look, I can tell you, I had a budget conversation today. It's like, oh, we got to reduce the budget this year. It's like, oh, okay, it's a good thing that we can handle that. But Yeah, it's not like, it's funny because, a lot of the legal tech companies are out there just think there's unlimited budget. The legal department just says, oh, this is amazing. Sure. We'll spend, tens of thousands of dollars on this. And it's like, guys, it doesn't really work that way. So it, you
Here's
got
like
to find a
another
way somewhere.
here's like a tactile example of how this happened. And shout out to Gary Kalachi, CEO of Alexa Translations, who like said this to me actually was, so Gary has this incredible, not, I'm looking at, I was a former client. So, and I love it and I love Gary, but like, it was like a translation software, right? So it took like that former humans would do the translating to, you're dropping hundreds of documents in Alexa translation software. It's spitting it out in all these languages. And so when I said to Gary, I'm like, oh, like great product. Probably your lowest tier is like more than I need and more expensive than I can afford. And he said, oh, Chad, it's not just a legal product. HR team, marketing team. Why don't you ask them if they have translation needs? Well, we were opening up an office in Chile. We had a Quebec business. So of course they did. And so then when you start talking to the other business teams, now you're bringing solutions to them. Lawyers always say they want to be a trusted advisor. Well, do the work. Don't just talk about it. And so when you go to the HR team and marketing team saying like, how are you translating all this stuff? And they're like, we've got, this person doing it for us. Why are you doing that? Like we could get this product and split it 3 ways. Now it becomes affordable. And so when you're trying to find budget, to what Mitch was saying is like, who can you leverage? When I did a CLM, sales, account management, sales
exactly.
ops, everyone wins,
Yep. Yeah, CLM is not a legal thing. It's like it crosses so many dimensions that everybody can, kick in some cash.
That's right. You get everyone to throw in 5 or 10 grand, you're going to be there. And that should be very doable for all the functions. So, Mitch, I want to think about like, I have 3 rapid fire questions for you here. And the first one is, I want to go back to early Mitch in his career, frustrated with the way you were being forced to operate, felt like there was a different way. You didn't know that you were going to be, advising countries and cities and major international players. But so like, what would be the tip that you would give early Mitch who was frustrated but didn't know the possibilities that were to come? What would you say to that person who could be listening now saying like, I know I'm frustrated, but I don't know how I should even think about what it could be? What would you say to early Mitch?
What would I say to early Mitch? I think don't be afraid. Okay, fear is a very strong thing, but also be calculated in terms of trying to understand what it is that's bothering you. Read as widely as possible because chances are someone else is already talking about that or thinking about it, and if you can leverage off that to help reframe what is really bothering you and put you in a right direction. So, and that's just, it shouldn't just be a legal thing either, right? Don't stay in the silo. So, don't be afraid to be afraid. Break out of the silo and find your tribe. People say that all the time, but it is true. I mean, you got to find your tribe wherever they may be.
And that reduces the fear too, because then when you see other people saying things that resonate for you, you think like, oh, I'm not like a unique, like odd duck that doesn't get it. You're like, other people get it. And maybe we're just actually a step ahead. So I love that. Okay. So
but I mean, it's a lot easier now than it was, when I was young Mitch, because young Mitch was in an era where none of this stuff existed. Now, I mean, I tell my students all the time, this is probably the best time to be thinking differently as a lawyer than ever. Go ahead.
You had to wait for that book to come out. Susskind's book to come out. Otherwise, like, how were you going to find him?
Yeah, I'd be just writing random stuff, going, how does this all fit together? I'm struggling, and then it's like, oh, perfect.
Okay, so you created quite an intentionally designed path, but for many people, when you chose it, and even now would see it as a very atypical path. And so, there's lots of folks out there that are working atypically, whether they have their own solo firm or whether they're working with folks like Good Lawyer as a fractional. There's lots of ways to practice law that aren't the 2 traditional paths. And so what would you say to folks who are either considering going an atypical route or are trying to understand folks who are in an atypical route? Like, what would you say that you'd want people to know about living an atypical career path as a lawyer?
It comes down to definition of success, right? Like you have to follow what you think is successful and stop trying to define yourself by other people's or by TV's or social media's definition of success. And so if you can just figure that out, that's what's really important. If people are doing stuff and you may think it's a little bit off the wall, you say, okay, well, that's not my thing, but it's their thing. They think that makes them happy, and that's how they view themselves as being successful. If they go down that path, that's totally fine. So that it comes down to that.
I love it. I don't usually deviate from my 3 questions, but I've got a question 2B now because you said that. What is the definition of success for Mitch today?
Autonomy and happiness, right? That's kind of it. Like money is money. Like, it's trite to say, and, it's really, people say this, but at a certain point in your life, right, money is just not a big enough factor for you to go down a road that you don't really like. And so that's what I found. The money is the money is the money. But if I don't have autonomy and I'm not happy, and I'm not making an impact in what I'm doing, then I'm checking out, honestly. So that's to me are the things that are super important. And I don't think I'm that different from a lot of people. I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah, those would be very similar answers for me. What is, the other piece that I want to tie in from both your answers is, I think a lot of this idea of like for you and for me, which you talked about, which is there's no universal truth. It's like, this is happiness for you, or this is motivating for you. And for me, it's this. And I really think that helps separate for us. Like Mitch can be happy and I can be happy for him based on the path that he's designed. And it also allows me to take it as a data point and build my own. And so I like that for you. And so when you say things like, okay, I think on the autonomy and agency piece, we understand it. What is happiness for you in your career these days? What does it look like?
Waking up and wanting to go to work, right? So having some interesting stuff to do, right? For an interesting group of people, and being able to see how that flows through. So the stuff that I work on now, I can see it in action. It's like, okay, I did that. Oh, cool. 2 months from now, I see how it plays out. It's like, oh, that makes me happy, right? Or these people, we did this for the company, and the company was really happy about it. We got money for the company when an airline went down. Great, that's a good day for me. But the other thing is too, I think the other thing that I like about working with a team is, helping my team, move up in their career. That I'm finding really gratifying now. It's like, okay, good. You guys are in a good place. I'm always asking them, how are we doing? What more can we do? What can I do? Right. And if you're saying that the answer is, everything's good, that's cool. But I want to know if there's something else I can do to help you guys. So that's a part of the happiness mix, is helping other people in their careers or whatever.
Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing it, because I wanted to show folks the thought exercise of, there's these top line answers we tell ourselves very quickly in our brain, like, oh, autonomy, happiness. But I think we're not really trained in defining it for ourselves. And I think we actually have to define it in order to share that and go out and seek it. Otherwise, we're just saying words that have different definitions to different people.
Yeah. And that also, if you don't do that, then you end up in a place that you don't want to be, right? That's because right. Because you said all these really, okay. And then you get there, oh, it's actually not really it. It's because these other pieces are missing now in a place that I don't want to be. So now I got to start all over again. I got to find some else. That's nobody wants to do that.
No,
it's not efficient for you. It's not
for your career.
Yeah. And it's not efficient for the people you're working for either, who, you guys were not on the same wavelength. So
That's right. That's right. Okay. Last rapid fire question for you. Is there something that we haven't talked about yet today that you are really trying to get into kind of the hearts and minds of lawyers out there, or just some interesting kind of theme that's running around in the back of your mind about where you might want to take your career, in this next phase? Like, is there anything that we haven't talked about that's like super exciting for you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's super exciting for me is watching the generative AI stuff play out, right? So, and that's very, and I say that not from a technology perspective, but from the perspective of how that is going to change how I'm practicing now and how other people are going to practice. And so it's really sort of not formed in my head yet as to this. I just watch it a lot, and I keep really thinking deeply about how does this change this? How does this change this? And as we see these iterations coming really, really fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm super pumped about. Is trying to figure out, get rid of the hype aspect of it. Let's get rid of all that kind of stuff. But how can this help us? So
And where are
that's.
you feeling on the nervous to optimistic scale? Like, are you
Oh,
in the middle? Or
I'm not nervous, and I'm not optimistic. I'm very realistic about it. I'm I just want to see where it goes, and I want to think about what is really useful about it. And right, like I've been playing around with it at work, and one of the things that we did and was a very simple thing that I don't think a lot of people have thought about now. Maybe they have, but we have all these policies in all these companies, right? And the policies can be very dense and they can be very complicated.
Yeah.
But we fed it into a generative AI model. And I said to the business guys, I said, look, we built this thing. It's still a prototype, but would this help you? Because you're asking me all these questions all the time about who can sign this and who has authority to do this. And it gets a little bit crazy, and it's even complicated for me because the policy is quite complex. And then they're like, oh my God, this is like the most amazing thing ever. And I'm kind of going, awesome. Like, I made you happy. I made myself happy. And it's just, that's it. So I'm just very realistic about what this can be done with it. So I'm not overly happy, and I'm not overly scared of anything. But it is going to be what it's going to be.
I'm seeing a lot of I think from years of law, I really struggle with email now. I just can't stand email, so I really like chat functionalities, and I'm seeing a lot of that in the generative AI legal tech products now. Is like you do a lot of work in like chats or chatbots, and I find email so mentally exhausting, and maybe it's because when you get like 8 million of them in like a certain limited number of years, and then you're like, I can't absorb it anymore. So I'm very curious on that part with the Gen AI and legal tech to see how much of the creation, population, synthesis, insights, and direction can be done through chatbots. Because when I was at a tech shop, like I saw chatbots supporting support teams, account management teams. So like they're feeding stuff in, whether it's directly to their customers or internal teams. I've been seeing them do it for years. And so I'm really curious on that part.
Yeah, no, and if, to the extent that we can get that into a real self-help mode, I think that is going to be really, really interesting for our teams. But
yeah,
we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of thing. That's what I'm just really, really focused on, just because it's coming up so often, and I'm tending to, see different opportunities to use it. So that's where I'm at right now.
I love it. I love it. Well, Mitch, we're going to have you at the Future of Law Summit, November 21. Can't wait to hear more of your insights there about the future of the way that we can practice, because I think the biggest takeaway that I would hope that folks listening and watching are taking away is that there's probably never been a better time to be a lawyer, to have options as a lawyer, to design a practice and a career in a way that's actually meaningful to you. Like, there's never been a better time than now for that.
100%.
So really appreciate you sharing that message. And I know that we're going to get plenty more insights from you November 21. Hope to see everyone there. Thank you, Mitch, so much for sharing your time with us, and to everyone for listening. We will see you on the next one.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Yeah, we'll see you guys at the conference.
Cheers.